and it is codependency fear-based?
And I threaten to. I think I will because you have a little bit of that codependency stuff going on.
Yeah.
Why don't you take
I
the first
said
shot at it?
I said of course it is, because a woman who was in an abusive relationship, based on that, the fear that if I don't do all the things, let them do what they want to do, that they're going to leave. And so definitely a fear was in me, and almost to the extreme of pleading with them,
Mm-hmm.
please, please,
Mm-hmm.
please, and putting up with a lot of stuff that I just, if I'd been a healthy woman and wasn't afraid of being left, I would have never with.
It's interesting. To me, it's not a question of is it fear based, it's a question of what is the fear. So in your case, it was fear of the person leaving you, and so that was the fear that drove you into codependency, and so you allowed yourself to be treated in ways that were grotesque. That, yeah, I mean, you knew better, you knew it wasn't healthy, you knew it wasn't right, but especially as a woman in a relationship like that, women tend to have an instinct that if I sacrifice, if I lay down my life, I should be able to complete this person. I should be able to be that final link, that final solution, whatever you want to call it, in the life of the other person. So then there becomes almost a drivenness there. I will fail if I don't do this.
And by me not feeling, and when I got into at that time, I thought it's 50. And what I've realized is I make me Christ. I didn't fool myself. Now what I understand is 100% each of you going all in. And I think I was afraid I would do a lot of things out of the I might be beaten it also. So the codependent is a sick thing to think about, that just do everything, allow yourself to be that way out of a fear.
Well, I'm totally not in a politically correct zone, but if you go back to the King James language, I actually like the word where it describes Eve as a helpmeet, and out of that you get the idea of completing. And so you have women in general. I mean, that female part is, wow, I'm here to serve. I'm there, but you also have spiritual gifts. And the exhorter gift, again, I'm in areas that maybe people don't know and understand, but servant and mercy. And you start looking at a lot of the different gifts. Their purpose is not in themselves. Their purpose is in their interaction with another person. So when I'm of a spiritual gifting, or I'm, and again, I believe that that's part of the feminine nature. When I'm in that nature where my value is based upon how this other person either responds to me, or forget even responds to me, how this other person responds to life. If I'm able to come along and complete and make whole and make a better person, if I'm a coach type of a person, if I'm a mercy person, if I have those kinds of things in me, now my value, my worth, my wholeness is based on your response. Well, you talk about something that is a setup for codependency at that point. If I really believe that, and I allow that to take over my thinking to where, oh, my absolute worth, my absolute success, my absolute reason for being is tied up in your response, think about how dependent that relationship ends up being.
Okay, you just led into my second question,
Okay.
and you didn't know it. So, what would you suggest for someone who is struggling with self worth in a codependent relationship?
Well, the first thing that I always talk about there is eggs in one basket. And when there is codependency, there almost always is a secondary condition where the other relationships tend to be cut off or minimized. So if you have all of your relationship eggs in one basket, which is kind of what we do with romance. With romance, we teach the one and only, and it's the perfect thing, and it's going to satisfy you. And so we get this cultural backdrop that creates a stronghold. And that stronghold is I have to put all of my eggs in one basket. All of my relationship being fits there. Now, why did I immediately go to relationship? Value cannot be achieved. Value must be received. And that one's really important. You cannot grow your own value, because if you try to do that through performance, there's always, as you know, if you do it through performance, you know that as soon as you stop performing, now guess what? I have no value. So value has to be intrinsic. Value has to be something that's inside of you, that is permanent, that is solid, that is real. If that's based on performance, if that's based on knowledge, my value is only as good and only as long as I'm able to perform. So for me to really feel good about me, somebody from the outside, God, other people, somebody from the outside has to love me for who I am. And I'm going to tell you, the best time for you to receive value is when you're totally screwing up, when you're a total mess up, when things aren't going well. If someone can love you at that point, now I hear from you, not just that I'm valuable for my performance, but I hear from you that, wow, this person values me. And so the relationships are the primary way that you're going to receive value, and they need to be healthy relationships. You know, if they are manipulative, controlling, dominating, all of those kinds of things, obviously it's going to destroy my value. And so with codependency, what happens? Codependency almost always as a part of the picture. It's not just fear-based, but you see the value destruction that's going on. And people allow that value destruction to go on because my worth is now based on your response. So you put those two together. So for you to get into a safer place, what you have to do, you have to take those eggs and say, okay, I'm not all putting them all in one basket. If you happen to have a relationship with someone that's incredibly healthy and able to give value and so worth, and they never go into bad places. We're okay on the first two.
Yeah.
But then you add the third one, and they never go into bad places, because guess what? If they go on a bad run for a day, a week, a month, well, what happens to you then? You get really beat up on. So at that point, I take those eggs and I divide them out over several baskets. What does that mean? I have a quality relationship here and here and here and here and here. Now I've got half a dozen quality relationships. I wake up and someone's having a bad day. I've still got 5 relationships to go connect with, to draw on, potentially to get some perspective, to drink in some life. It's not nearly the crisis that it is when all of my eggs are in one basket.
That makes sense, because while God was bringing me out of all of that, it was, why don't you start listening to what several people are telling instead of just one person? And I realized if they told me something, I believed them and accepted what they said. Well, after I learned to listen to some other people who could feed into me, like you're saying, those things, I began to heal. I'm going to go into the next one. It kind of goes into this too. Mm-hmm. How would you suggest to someone that has a son or a daughter or any relationship who has been dependent on something and they've left and they want to come back? How would you, let's say you use the word judge or evaluate the timing and how you should handle that?
We actually deal with that in the program quite a bit, in that, are you coming here because you have a roof over your head and because you're in crisis, or do you actually have good motives, and are you in a good place? And I tell people, and this in a way can make me look bad, but I'm not a classic shelter person. You know, your classic mercy servant, whatever person, they can't stand to see a person in the street, and so they're going to have almost no boundaries. It's going to be, I can't stand to see you in that state, so therefore, just come on in and we'll figure it out later. Who I am, I want to see people grow. I want to see people get better. So it's much easier for me, and what you're talking about as a parent, again, this is going to be a little bit harder because, wow, it's my child. But it's much easier for me at that point to sit down and to face people and to say, and to ask them questions. And all of my questions are really revolve around this. Are you willing to do what you need to do to get better? And frankly, there's a corollary for the person who's offering that is, am I willing to be used? Because there is a period when people come to us, there's a period there where they don't really know the answer to that question. Are you willing to do? And so do what you need to do to get better. And so what I like to be able to do, and hopefully a good parent should be able to do some of this at least, I like to be able to lay out some semblance of, here's what I think you need to do to get better. And once you've laid that out, then now it's not just pie in the sky out there. Hey, can this thing work? It's got some practice, and the practice are you willing to do A? Are you willing to do B? Are you willing to do C? Now I've got it down to a practical level to where they have to look at me with some level of accountability and say, yes, I am willing to do that, or no, I'm not willing to do that. Just quickly, there are parents who can't live with themselves if the child is on the street or whatever the language is. Well, if that's true, back to shelter person, not shelter person. If that's true, then look yourself in the mirror and realize this is who I am, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I have to do right now because I'm toxic, because I'm not healthy, and I'm not looking at what's healthy for my child or whoever it happens to be. I'm doing what I'm driven to do. And so now, are we talking codependency? Yes, we are. Now we're talking codependency on the other side. That's why, to me, it's so important to identify, are we going to head into a toxic relationship? What would cause it to be toxic? Are we going to move towards healthiness? If you can identify those factors, now we've had a real discussion, an honest discussion, and potentially this thing can work in a better way, or potentially we can look at it and say, this is not going to work. It's going to be unhealthy for you. It's going to be unhealthy for me. And I can't do unhealthy for my own sake. I can't do unhealthy towards you.
What would you say to someone who wants the child out or that relationship to end, and they threaten you?
And the child threatens?
Yes. Or the other person in the relationship, but the child threatens.
That really does come back to, what are you willing to do? And that's a hard question, but if the parent isn't willing to take the next step, then the answer is you put up with it. And many times that's the correct question, what are you willing to do? If the parent is willing, then there are legal means. If they are willing, then you get help. You find whatever resources you can find to impact the situation. And at some point, child is going to leave. At some point, you notify them that, sorry, we're changing the locks or whatever. I mean, there are power moves that you can make somewhere in there to try to force the circumstance. And another issue there, just like in domestic abuse, ends up being safe, not safe. It's important to have wisdom, and it's important to do it in a way that, is safe. If there is a chance of the child getting better, it's also important to walk it through in a way where, what can I do? Not just what can I do, how can I do it? So that I give us the best chance to heal later on, or all of those kinds of things. And so a lot of times it's not just what to do, but it's how you do it. And learning to put together a manner where you can walk away from that with your conscience feeling good. Part of what I do in the recovery program, I always say, if I'm going to make an error, I will give one too many chances, not one too few. So I watch my language. I try to be precise. I try to be clear. I try to lay down things as cleanly as we can, so that if we come to a point of removal, there's no question about it. And the person knows that they had clear guidelines that were absolutely violated, that were logical and reasonable, because it was about them getting better. It was about us becoming more healthy. So you've taken all of those steps. It doesn't mean the person won't be angry. It doesn't mean that it won't be ugly. But what I find time and time again, what it does mean is a month later, 6 months later, the chances of restoring relationship and walking in integrity with one another are just much higher.
Right. And so as we close today, that I feel like all three of these, questions really play into this new Living Hope family group. And the one thing I was thinking as you were talking, for the person that's dealing with that, how important it would be to find a group of people. However, I think a lot of people think there's a stigma, and it can be kind of scary also to step out and join those groups, because everyone's going to know your business and we like to hide things. But what I think's great about this new Living Hope family group that you're starting is you can do it in your home and, start to become a part of that. And then hopefully from that, maybe find a group of people in your community.
What you're talking about on next several Fridays, we're going to be talking about some of these kinds of things. We will be talking about you are codependent, or you have somebody in your home that is using, or whatever language. Okay, what now? And so we have the video piece. In terms of in town, obviously there's a Celebrate Recovery. There's a Life Recovery group. We encourage you to check out those. We're doing an actual live in-person Living Hope on a monthly basis. You can check out those dates, but on the next several Fridays, we'll be talking about, okay, you have somebody like that in your world. What do you do? How do you handle it? Hopefully even some of the things that we talked about today really are practical and helpful in that area.
Yeah, for that, I think if you can just admit that you need help, that's what began to heal me. And I believe that's so important. And just, it's like a cry, I'm crying out for help here. And so I think that's a good first step for anybody to take.
Well, real questions for today. We had some questions thrown out. Again, we encourage you to send in questions. We want to jump on that and really speak to you wherever you're struggling. So thank you for those questions. Get those sent in, and thank you for joining us for today's live stream, and pass it on to others, and we'll see you next time.